George, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
For sure. I'm excited to chat with you today about your app, Basis. And before we kind of get into that, can you tell listeners a bit about who you are, a little bit of your background, and sort of what you're currently working on at the moment?
Sure. So, healthcare brat. I grew up in a healthcare home, both on the health insurance and kind of the treatment side. I spent years as an athlete and as in the military, so I got a ton of exposure to health data and performance and body optimization through those experiences. Competed in triathlon and track, which were you're constantly trying to optimize for cardiovascular performance. And then I studied at USC and UCLA business. My first project out of school was a pacemaker with a team of healthcare visionaries at the time. Spent years building in different aspects of the healthcare industry. So worked on consumer supplements, worked on 2 years ago on a home testing system for COVID-19. We went through the FDA process to, as part of that pandemic response effort. In the last 2 years, I joined the Stanford Bioinformatics program and started Basis. And the primary objective with Basis was things that I learned through my experiences over the years, the things that I saw that there were fallbacks or kind of like limitations of later stage or other types of solutions, mainly around getting people to care about managing their health on a daily basis, or making the right decisions or empowering them to make them with the least amount of friction.
And so, yeah, I guess this is not something that I had thought about or asked you about, but Basis, what's kind of behind that name? Kind of before we get into maybe the technology behind it, where did you come up with this name Basis, and kind of what's the idea behind that?
Yeah, so I mean, when we were first doing our customer interviews, everyone kept saying that I have so much data that I generate, but there's no place where they can all live together. There's no place where I can make sense of it all together. So the grander vision for Basis is we have this hypothesis that user-generated health data, so that includes wearable data, it includes home testing, genetic data, and a ton of other things that are coming in the future. We believe that that's going to be the primary way of how we make health and wellness decisions. And people need a place to make sense of it, but we don't need a database. We need something that's actually going to give us practical utility. So the basis of the name, I guess, no pun intended, is that it's a, let's call it like a base, or like a basis for you to make kind of like your day-to-day decisions. Yeah.
No, I love that. And I think, it was important, I think, for you to give your background in just showing people here and telling people that you have like this huge background in sort of like health technology and this like vast understanding of, big data or maybe even small data kind of on that individual health level. But, I do love the name and the basis, behind the name, as you said. But if you were to give an elevator kind of pitch of this app, you described it a little bit, but if you were just describe maybe in 1 or 2 sentences to people, if they come up to you and say, what's Basis? Like, what would you tell them? Or what would you like in 1 or 2 sentences for listeners to know what this app is?
Sure. So, I mean, in today's context, the key thing we'd like people to know is that we're building the missing link between the wearable data and the practical utility in their day-to-day life. So, in a simpler way, we found that people generally love their wearable devices. They buy them with this aspiration to personalize their own health journey and wellness journey and performance journey. And these devices are amazing, but we found that they're very underutilized and underappreciated because most people just don't know how to translate HRV, resting heart rate, just general calories into something that gives them context in the decision making. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to empower them through the context of their life, how their physiological state, so what their wearable data is telling us, how to make more personalized decisions throughout the day and throughout the week. So that includes how to manage their energy. It includes how to manage their recovery and their stress in relationship to their day. And we have a calendar sync that we both read and write to. And that was like a piece that unlocked a ton of like context in a person's life. Because if we just look at health data, we don't really know why some things are happening. Whereas now we've unlocked this entire new layer of why is Brady, why is his heart rate going up right now, even though he's not moving? Mm-hmm. So there's a ton of interesting insights there. when you travel, when you sleep, why you don't sleep. Like there's a ton of very interesting things in what our schedule looks like. And a byproduct of the pandemic is not only that we just increased our wearable usage, which was, great for the future of kind of personalized health, but also remote work kind of made everyone use calendar to a level that they didn't use before. So we have a ton of data there that very accurately represent most people's day-to-day life.
Yeah, the calendar sync is an aspect that I definitely want to get into. And that was one of the more unique things when you were first telling me about this, where I was like, wow, like syncing your wearable data and these suggestions and the coaching with the calendar. I mean, it was sort of an overlooked aspect by a lot of these wearable devices that we currently have. So, I use the Coros app to track my sort of mileage and my running mileage and my cycling mileage. I use Oura Ring, and sure, they all give me these recovery scores and these readiness scores, et cetera. And they may even tell me, what type of workout I should do today or when it might, want me to work out. But as we discussed kind of earlier offline, a few weeks ago and stuff, like if my schedule doesn't allow me to work out at the time when my app is suggesting me to work out, then it's kind of a moot point, right? I mean, everything depends on, if I have a work meeting from 2 to 3, but that's when my peak energy levels occur. Well, that's kind of conflicting there. So this whole calendar sync thing, again, I do want to talk about that in a little bit, but a super unique aspect of Basis that I really enjoy. But yeah, so kind of going back to what you were talking about on the on Basis sort of being this way to kind of create actionability out of all of our data. I think that's super important because, as you said, we have so much data. Everybody these days seems to have like a wearable, whether it's a Ring, whether it's just their Fitbit, Apple Watch, whatever. But most people, myself included, even people who know what the data means, don't really know how to use it. We know how to use, we can track our steps, sure, increase, decrease steps throughout the day. And, we can know what our heart rate means. But things like heart rate variability, much less clear on what we should do with that. Maybe if heart rate variability is low, some people might know, maybe I should rest today. But in general, it's kind of like most people will just choose to disregard that. So I, for one, have just been kind of, I've been testing Basis for a while and just seeing like, trying to use my peak energy hours, my predicted peak energy hours during the day to, my app will alert me, take advantage of this time during the day and things like that. So it's very neat. And so there are a couple general concepts like behind the app. And so if I'm like kind of have mine up just like for reference right now, but it'll show me if I open the app, today's energy schedule, it'll have daily hunger schedule, and then some like daily recommendations. So could you kind of go through each of those 3 aspects of like when someone opens the app, what each of those 3 things are sort of telling us? And then if you could, maybe expanding upon how maybe that data is generated. We don't have to go too deep onto that, but daily energy schedule being generated by the app, and how is my daily hunger schedule being generated by the app, and so on and so forth.
Sure, cool. So the general idea was we were trying to look at, if we're going to create insights, can we find insights that are proactive, or that they empower you to make a decision versus just kind of like a reactive thing. So if I'm looking at my readiness score, and that's a great kind of like data point that we're utilizing in a ton of functions, it's still not telling me anything about, it's not giving you a ton of insight about how to manage your day. It's just telling you what state you're in. It is a binary decision maker though. Should I or should I not do something? Right. How intensely do I go? But we try to look at insights from the data we get. How can we find something that will empower you to make your decisions throughout the day? So the circadian rhythm is a concept that it's just one of the many things that we're implementing in the product. But the circadian rhythm is a concept that has implications around kind of like your training, your productivity, your kind of like overall stress and recovery. So that's something that we looked at. Okay, wearable data gives us movement data. It gives us sleep data. It gives us, just general resting heart rate data. So we found a great way to kind of identify when someone is biologically most and least primed for kind of like energy expenditure, and also validate that based on their actual like behavior. So that was one kind of data point that we saw people doing a ton of behavioral change around changing when they put their most important meetings. They started asking us, okay, can you start telling me when I should do my workouts based on my optimal energy schedules? And then we started looking at other things. So the hunger rhythm, right? So nutrition is a big piece. And within kind of like the digital health ecosystem, it's one of the tougher things to, let's call it passively or automatically understand. You can have CGMs, maybe 70% of the time they're accurate. If you're super optimized and not eating too much glucose, like then it's even less likely to identify a meal, right? And then it also depends on a scan. So we're trying to find how can we empower people with information about their nutrition without requiring user data entry. So based on kind of like as a proxy of circadian rhythm, we found that there's specific times that your body, biologically, you individually, is primed to have dinner, primed to have like last meal, and how your hunger kind of develops throughout the day. So that was another insight that we found. People could make better decisions around when to eat, how much to eat, when to stop eating. And at the end of the day, a ton of the things we've done in this earlier stage in the beta is prime people for the timing of the day. So when should you, put your hardest, most strenuous activities? When should you stop eating? When should you have your dinner time? When should you stop drinking coffee? When should you do recovery? So the when part of kind of health and wellness was something we felt very confident in being able to tackle as a first step, considering the tie to calendar. So if we can empower you to understand your day and think of, actually the calendar came from our users. They said, my day is my day, or, well, this is my day looks like this. So like, okay, why don't we look at what your day looks like all the time? And we have a ton of functions around the calendar that's not just reading. So we also have NLP. So we try to contextualize what is an event. Is it a work event? Is it a workout event? If it is, then we make different decisions. Mm-hmm. We have automated kind of rescheduling. So let's say you decide that you want to do some additional thing after we've analyzed your day. We'll reprocess that and we'll create a new set of recommendations. But generally, the timing was the first part we wanted to tackle with the product, because it ties into a powerful concept in how we wanted to change behavior, which was we want to empower people to think about their health throughout the day and how to make better decisions that are personalized. We have other things in the pipeline that we want to address, but timing was kind of like the first thing that we wanted to work on.
Yeah, and what I like too is just the user interface of it is very, maybe if I post this video on YouTube and stuff, I'll kind of post some pictures along up with our discussion, but like the user interface is very clean and like easy to see. So again, like I'm pulling up my app right now, and if I daily energy schedule, it has my high energy time between 8 and 10 a.m. And then I have like another peak between 5 and 6. And that's, obviously seems pretty accurate kind of based on what I do. I typically work out in the morning, somewhere between 7 and 8, sometimes a little bit earlier. That's not ideal. That's sometimes more forced than it is by choice. But then another workout maybe around like 5 or 6 p.m. So unfortunately, sometimes my peak energy is, you want to work out during that time, but you also kind of want to do your most like cognitively demanding work. But luckily it's sort of a long enough period of 3 hours where you can kind of get both done in there. It is also interesting too, where I have my low energy during like 1 to 2. That's typically when I like to take a nap. So, the predictive value of it has seemed pretty spot on for me with the energy schedule and things. So I found that to be super cool. I thought about something when you were talking about the hunger projection. So you mentioned how the hunger kind of schedules are less so based on the user data input and more just sort of like rooted in a foundation of circadian rhythms. So for users, are the hunger projections going to be more similar then across all of the users because it's just based on more of a circadian timing without the input of data? Or is that still going to vary between, say, like me, you or me, are we going to have different like hunger schedules?
Well, the circadian rhythm is personalized to you based on that energy schedule model. So it is personalized to the extent that is. But we are trying to, in our beta, we're trying to figure out with the users how much user data entry and what types would they be willing to give us that would actually empower the product to make educated kind of decisions. Because I think when you rely on user data entry, as many entrepreneurs in the space know, is you're now relying on imperfect data or possibly missing data, but you don't know it's missing. So we've tried to find ways to not touch user data entry just yet, and try to see how good can we get without that user data entry, and also thinking about the future. like we're envisioning new types of, you know, data coming through the fold, and integrity and kind of like accessibility that could potentially, and we've tinkered with so many ways around nutrition. Like, funny enough, that's been the thing that we had a version of our beta where we were actually delivering people food at the
Oh,
time
wow.
that, you know, they should be eating. And that was a way for us to essentially know that they ate, right? Because you know, we gave them the food.
Right, right.
It was a huge success, but logistically wasn't easy to keep up, and that was an entirely different business model. Obviously, we've played around with CGMs and given a ton of our users CGMs, and you know, through, or they already had them through other products. That's not kind of the space we want to get into, but we do want to find a way to understand the behavior. Obviously, if they have something in their calendar. But yeah, I mean, the calendars is also super interesting, because here's my case. On Tuesdays, that's the one day I have less meetings. And funny enough, my readiness is better on Tuesdays. So I'm actually more primed to like do something. So Tuesday is a day where my workout intensity and my workout duration can actually be higher without it taking a hit in my other objectives in the day. So there's like these interesting things when you start correlating the two, like when kind of like your well-being or like your physiological meets context. It's super interesting, the kind of insights you can start coming up with. And we're thinking of other contextual, like we've started working with location as a data point, right? Because I think one of the common kind of complaints of wearable users is, you know, my Oura Ring told me to stand when I was like driving on the freeway.
Right,
You know?
right.
So that's definitely solvable with, like, you know, location data, assuming, you know, the user gives us that data. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, there's like really kind of nearly unlimited data sources from where we could like be pulling stuff. The nutrition one is definitely just something that interests me, because as you mentioned, you know, you could, once you get starting to integrate continuous glucose monitors, perhaps, you know, with the advent of, I know there's like a continuous ketone monitor now that's like being developed, or maybe a dual glucose ketone monitor. So all of those things, you know, could potentially be integrated. What about something like, have you ever, or maybe this is already the case, where it integrates with like Zero or a fasting app where you're like tracking your fasting times? Is that something that's maybe could be considered into the sort of daily schedule as well?
Yeah, that's in the pipeline.
Okay, cool.
And also we've also in the pipeline is also integrating with meditation providers. So when we are, you know, kind of identifying situations where, so I think if we think of the meditation kind of like value proposition, I'm a huge proponent, right? I major difference in my life personally in terms of managing kind of the strain of the day. But when you think about it, it's really user kind of triggered, or it's like a static trigger, like every day at this time. Whereas if we think of how you know, individual behavior works, you're more primed to want to meditate when you have the need, or when that need kind of continues to exacerbate. So what we've identified as an opportunity is what we can dynamically kind of trigger this based on, you know, Brady is feeling more stressed over the last 7 days. And then now we can prime you with a handpicked meditation at the right time. We think that we can empower those products as well. So we've started having those conversations about let's essentially curate your content within our product. And that's an example of a recommendation where Basis doesn't just say, hey, these are like the optimal times for you, or this is like a window, let's say. This is something actual that you should do right now, if you want to follow it, of course. That would actually make you feel better.
Right. So that's kind of like the second layer to it. We have like this timing layer of like, here's when your general energy, general hunger, general, you know, activities during the day should occur. And then we have sort of like the second layer where it's like, oh, here's what you should specifically do, or like specifically not do. Because a lot of the times, you know, especially if we're thinking like an athlete or thinking like a coach, you know, maybe today my readiness score is super low, my heart rate variability is super low. Then Basis can kind of take all of that data and tell me, oh, maybe you don't want to do sort of an anaerobic workout or something that's going to really stress the sympathetic nervous system, or something like that. So definitely that layer of recommendations on what type of workout to do, certainly important. So even in my app right now, because it looks like something like that is already included. So it has like a workout recommendation for me today. It's telling me to do some traditional strength training for about an hour and 21 minutes. wants my max heart rate to be 123, average heart rate 101. So it's sort of telling me, is that basing it on my, say, recovery score today and things like that? Is it using all that data to generate maybe what type of workout that it's, I should do on a particular day?
The early version of that, which we're in the process of improving, shipping an improved version right now. The early version of that was, let's just proxy based on your readiness and your general kind of like, what does your day look like? Let's find the best approximation from a previous workout you've done that your body responded well to. So we're actually using what you saw there is your own data. That's something.
Oh, okay. Very cool.
It's giving it to you. That was like the easiest way for us to ship something that would make sense for an individual. But there's a big update coming to that specific function of how do we direct workout. We won't give people workout instructions because that's a whole other type of product and a whole product. But we do want to empower people on what their body's able to do in relation to the context of their day.
Yeah, and that makes total sense because, you know, going back to kind of the meditation thing or whatever, it seems, you know, logical that you would use workouts or recommendations that people have done versus saying like, okay, Brady, you know, your readiness score is low today, go and meditate for 30 minutes. Well, if I don't want to meditate for 30 minutes or I don't traditionally meditate, then that's probably going to be a recommendation that I just like throw out the window. So, you know, whereas prescribing something like you know, a low intensity run or a ride on the Peloton or something is more feasible because those are things that I actually do. And so will there sort of be an integration then with maybe apps that the user uses? I know that again, something like kind of we talked about earlier, but like, so I have the Peloton app on my phone because I use the Peloton bike and sort of synchronize that data. So basis, will it be able to say, prescribe to me a specific workout on, say, the Peloton platform, or maybe a specific meditation, say if I'm using like the Headspace app, maybe it'll actually put on like a workout that I should go in and do for that particular day. Is that something that is eventually going to be sort of a function of the app?
That's a key part of the value proposition. That's part of that health on autopilot concept. So it's like, so a key assumption is that people kind of deviate from their path because it just involves context switching, new decisions every day. Just every single ounce of a decision can trigger kind of like a deviation from a good behavior. So we're trying to find a system that empowers you to reduce all those little micro decisions that are personalized to you. And also we found that, you know, a ton of people kind of like make a repetitive decision every single day, assuming their body's in the same state every single day. And that doesn't work out. And that eventually leads to bad behavior anyways, like you just burn out or like you just can't sustain that behavior. So as a product, it's intended to remove that friction of health planning, as we call it, even though it's not a concept that people think about, but like it's the planning of your health kind of activities or wellness activities, and automating them. So like they just appear in your day. And this may not relate to everyone, but at least in our power users and our beta users, many of them are almost, for better or for worse, on autopilot throughout the day based on their calendar. So actually it's almost like a doctor being prescriptive to you, telling you do this or that. That's their calendar already. We're just plugging into that and adding some positive activities in addition to kind of like the work related ones. But yeah, we're also trying to give enough value proposition even outside kind of like scheduling things. So empowering you with the decision makings to make, you know, your own decisions throughout the day.
Yeah, I mean, the autopilot feature is certainly one of like the most intriguing or like the most attractive aspects of it, because a lot of people, there are some people who sort of like to make their own decisions based on, you know, this is what I want to do for the workout during the day. But for most people, I think the main value proposition is like, just literally tell me what to do, tell me what workout to do, and I'll do it. And it takes a lot of that stress of planning away. And as you said, sometimes we make, you know, decisions that might not, they're either going against sort of our physiological data, or they might not be the best for, say, optimizing recovery the next day. I mean, I know that this is something that I do probably every day. You know, if I wake up and see like my readiness score on my Oura is probably recommending against me doing something hard, I'm probably going to be doing it anyway, because I don't necessarily have something directly telling me based on your recovery score, this is what you should do. So I think that, you know, putting those recommendations in there and saying, hey, this is what you should do. Same thing like a doctor telling you to take a medication, or like a dietitian providing you a meal plan. It just takes a lot of the thinking out of it, which for a lot of people, I think is is certainly beneficial. I mean, it's really like having your own personal sort of AI coach in a way. And I know that's probably part of the reason that you created it in the first place.
Yeah, and in order to give that, you need to find this contextual layer. So like that's a big piece of like, us trying to add additional data points is how can we, unless we know what's going on in your life, we can't really be that AI coach. So yeah, 100%. So trying to give that value through the context of your day and the context of your body is something we think is just going to be the way that inherently we do things in the future. Whereas today it's a ton of just like information at our feet that we every day have to pick and choose which one do we want to use. So do I check my wearable data? Do I reach out to my coach? Do I go to my coach? And I personally, love working with personal trainers and health coaches, doctors. I mean, I interact with them every week for my own purposes and for the product. But the reality is that they have a limited amount of time. Like they can't go through your own data constantly throughout the day, right? So that's where like you start having like this the trade-off between a product that is automatically looking at everything, personalizing to your own body constantly, and seeing, did you actually do something? People also lie. They'll tell their coach, yeah, I've been training 5 days a week, but reality is, far from it. So there's really interesting things that you can do with data. A lot of challenges, and that's part of the reason why these things are really tough and why many times they don't work, is because you have to make a ton of assumptions. You have to, you have data and you don't know if it's correct or not. People don't sync their wearables all the time. People sync them late. And that is why actually, as much as our product is a data science and technical product, UX is actually equal right up there, maybe even more so important. Because how do we educate people on why something isn't working or what they should do, or how to drive their decision making and their contribution to the product in the right way so that the product can work. So UX has been a huge piece for us, and I almost consider health literacy, or kind of like is probably the biggest thing that we want to do than essentially the bioinformatics models or like the data science models per se.
No, certainly. And, I think it's interesting to consider the implications of sort of removing the interaction that would say come with somebody going to a medical provider or going to a personal trainer or going to their dietitian, because as you just brought up, people lie, whether that's intentionally or unintentionally. I think the best example of that is just like a dietary recall questionnaire, in epidemiological nutrition. It's like, people don't know what they eat. Most people don't know what they had for breakfast today. And so, when people are talking to their dietitians, they're inherently, again, whether it's conscious or unconscious, they're going to lie or be inaccurate about what they're eating. Similarly, if your personal trainer is asking you whether you adhered to this workout in the week where you were gone, you're probably going to maybe fudge a little bit of the numbers on what you did. Same thing with your doctor. You're not going to really most people aren't going to be upfront with their doctor about what they're doing. I feel like removing that personal interaction, though, almost will enhance the accuracy, because, if it's just me entering this info into the app, what incentive do I have to either give imperfect data to the app or sort of try to trick the app into giving me a certain recommendation? I almost just feel like there's no risk to being dishonest. So I'm going to put, all the accurate information into that app. And second point being, data doesn't really lie. So I can't, pretend to run 10 miles and sync it into my app. I mean, it's taking this data just from my apps automatically. So you can't really lie about the data going in there. So I almost feel like the removal of the personal interaction will almost enhance just sort of the recommendations and, like you said, the health literacy of people. Would you kind of agree with that maybe, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think aspirationally, I think those are spot on. I think, we generally, and again, I think human coaches have a very strong place in the whole kind of value proposition. I think there's a reason we're not giving specific workout instruction. Let's just stay with workouts, because it's something that people can easily relate to. Because everyone has their own kind of like fitness goals, and they have like their own, this is a whole different topic, their own fitness setup. So this is another thing that we did a ton of iteration around. Can we give people enough recommendation based on their own custom setups but then you open up a new decision tree of all these different options based on your body's and state and all that kind of stuff. So I think you want to empower people to tell them, even almost educate their own coach. Hey, listen, today I can go for 50% intensity. This is as much as I can go, and this is why. Cool. Now the coach actually is in a better place to give you the outcome that you're expecting, so as to not push you to the point where you're maybe on the risk of getting injured. Huge thing that people constantly deal with, making you feel so uncomfortable because you're not recovered that you actually don't want to go back. Like there's all these things tied into behavior again, and like sustaining good behavior that have to do with just giving people the information in a way that they can actually utilize. And I think wearables aspirationally and like the supporting systems aspirationally want to get there, but it's almost like wearables have to give you that data. So you do need an extra layer. And that's where we come in, where you are combining a ton of the data that's in a way that's functional. And we don't have to care about giving you the data points per se, right? So that's where the value chain kind of plays in. Whereas, I have to get my data from my Oura Ring, right? Like where else am I going to get it? Like that's the reason I have the device. Right. But something else further down the value chain can come in and kind of like utilize that data in my life.
Yeah, and it also makes sense kind of in the aspect where, like you said, people don't want to give away probably like their physical coach. I mean, a lot of people like being coached and going to a studio to get trained or whatever, going to practice. But all of this data, that coaches can then begin to use. So, I go to practice, I show my coach, hey, here's what kind of my scores are in my basis app, and here's what it's saying about like my recovery and what types of workouts I should do, because then that reduces the complexity of like what the coach has to analyze versus say looking at my raw Oura Ring data. Most coaches or even people who are very literate in sort of what that data means can't make sense of all of that and use it in a matter of seconds to like prescribe a workout or say, oh, you should rest today, or this is what you should do. So it's then kind of then adding another layer, like the app does the work for you. I'll show this to my coach or personal trainer, and then they can use that data to then maybe prescribe something as well. So you kind of then have the recommendation from the app. Your coach is sort of then somewhat guided by the app to maybe prescribe a workout. So, that's very kind of an interesting aspect as well. Will there be sort of a coaching service affiliated with the app at, any point in the future? Like if, will you have, say, advisors who people can like chat with in the app and ask about certain recommendations or things like that? Or is it just going to be totally sort of automated?
Yeah, we're not sure about that. We're going to let our users decide kind of, through the beta. But right now we do have a feature that users can reach out to us and ask any question. So they can ask, what's my fitness level? How do I change my peak energy to be from, instead of 8 to 10, be from 7 to 9, something like that. Like they can use us and our team as a resource to understand what their data is saying and how they can use it in a practical way. And to us, that's a great way to learn what people are interested in and what they'd like to see in the product. We don't know if there's like these categories of products that have a ton of kind of like market saturation, like a ton of really, really good solutions. And that includes, great providers, great coaches and great providers in other parts of the well-being and wellness space. You have the hardware, you have the content, right? So we're the way we're positioning ourselves is trying to find how do we work with all these other products. So we've had coaching products come out to us and reach out to us, and we're exploring ways to work with them instead of us building it ourselves. Same thing with obviously the hardware we're integrating with the content providers. We're also exploring how do we work with them. So I think there's multiple decision points in the day, and there's also there's a continuum of different types of decisions too. Like there's these daily decisions, and there's like these anomalies that happen, and those are situations where you can actually trigger new types of providers, whether consultants, whether content. So let's say on a weekly basis, you're actually pretty focused on your productivity and your energy, but all of a sudden you go through some type of stress related kind of episode. Like you need different types of support. We can trigger different type of content from a different provider, let's say, or a different type of coach. So those are things that we want to see in the future. Today, though, as I said, we're not sure if we're going to provide any type of coaching or consultation options, but any beta user, anyone from your show that wants to join, they can use us in our team, and we have excellent performance and health coaches on the team, kind of supporting. They can essentially use it for free. There's no cost, and you can kind of tap into that. And we're trying to learn from you guys as much as hopefully we can give you value. So
yeah, certainly. And then kind of a final just thing about maybe like the function of the app. Is there any sort of, and this is just me kind of like thinking of maybe what might be beneficial, not telling you what to add or anything, but will there be kind of any sort of maybe an education that would come along with it? Because I can see a situation where somebody using it might say, okay, well, maybe why is this recommendation being provided to me? Maybe even somebody's just like, oh, well, what is, if there's something on heart rate variability, like what is heart rate variability? Or like, why is my peak energy rising then and falling then? Will there be some sort of maybe like educational aspect, whether that's like article content or video wise tied to the app? Because I think that, that could potentially be something that people could enhance their health literacy and learning, why these recommendations are being made. I'm sure that there will be like a website where, people can go and read about all these certain metrics, but is there anything like that in the works?
Two concepts around that. So one, we've kind of playing around with this inverted pyramid of how wearable data is played out today, where you typically see let's put it this way, it's like you see the data, then you see the insight, then you see the recommendation, let's say. Since we're trying to give the recommendation first, we haven't implemented this yet, but where you can actually work backwards and see the insight that led to the recommendation and then the data that led to that insight.
Very cool.
Example, like you mentioned the energy schedule. Okay, so why did you come up with this? Like, then we can explain the insight, and then we can explain the data we used, and then we want to actually be fully transparent to the user on what data we used. Many times our users are debugging for us, like they're letting us know, like, hey, listen, this data actually is inaccurate, or it's missing. So very much in the learning process there. The other thing, we have an iteration out there, not in all users, is a personalized article based on a behavior or a challenge or an opportunity we see for someone. So we're essentially tinkering with dynamic content around the thing that's most challenging for you to improve your well-being and performance, let's say, right? So that's interesting. People are definitely more inclined to read something that's very personalized to them. We have to see how that scales, but there's definitely, from a health literacy standpoint, you have to educate. To some extent, it's also more so about building trust. So if you can build that trust, and people understand the foundation of recommendations and the foundation of kind of like the structure and the insights, I think then you empower them to actually follow the behavioral kind of like output that you want. So it's an interesting experiment to see what type of content do we provide that's not mundane and kind of like repetitive. I think there's a ton of content out there that people just don't even read. They don't care. It's really boring. So how do you deliver that? So I think let's call it scientific communication, big piece of that. How do you make it interesting? I've done some interesting things to communicate to people fasting. So I did a water fast, a 5-day water fast. Published that with my own data. So I used a CGM, heart rate monitor, did a ton of other kind of like before and after blood work. Ton of interest on that because it was just like so individualized and like experiential, and it wasn't just regurgitating like, hey, this is what happens to your body when I fast,
Yeah, right.
And I explained my own challenges, like the 4th day I felt completely shocked, and I discovered that I could trick my body to giving me more glucose by doing a workout in the morning. And I went from like 52, my glucose, the metric mmG ordeal, I went to like a 76, which is livable, like you can actually function. So super interesting things. And I think finding ways to communicate in health literacy through personalized information, experiential, and data engages people much better. So yes, so that's another piece of identification and experimentation throughout the beta. We're essentially a very iterative team. Like we'll try essentially we'll try different concepts and see how people react. We're completely agnostic as to whether something should or would work until, you know, there's validation from the actual users. And we've been lucky to have amazing kind of like beta users who are very savvy. They've used a ton of products, very demanding, and yeah, they're teaching us along the way.
No, certainly. And the whole concept of just personalized, not only the recommendations, but the personalized content too, I think is a whole new area, you know, that really doesn't exist, but that can certainly be something that will be promising in the future. Because as you said, I think what really matters to people is not reading an article on intermittent fasting or reading an article on what is heart rate variability or reading an article on here's how to, you know, improve your sleep quality. Well, okay, well, how do I improve my sleep quality? Like not just in general, how does sleep quality improve? Because again, those recommendations, it's kind of just like a cut and paste, you know, you
Correct.
read 10 of those same articles throughout the internet. But if we could, and, you know, I have no idea how this, you know, can happen, but yeah, an article that's personalized for me based on my data, maybe like a monthly summary on, okay, if you want to sleep better next month, here's what you can do. Like, here's how you can change your eating habits or change, you know, you stop drinking alcohol or caffeine. And I know Basis is already trying to do that, but then I think if there's some way to generate content geared toward that, that could be like very, very cool. So definitely some promising, a promising area there.
Yeah, I think you're right. People respond well to personalized insights tied into kind of like education, and similar people to them. So there's most products require like a social component also to work, especially in today's kind of like product environment. Something we haven't yet figured out or played around with, to be honest. But yeah, I mean, we're social beings, and well-being is, you know, social is a big piece of well-being by default. So we'll see if there's also components to that down the road. But again, like the big challenge or the big thing that we're trying to solve today for people is how do we make these devices that you're buying with kind of like this aspiration to like have them impact your life in a positive way, continue to use them, because we're finding out that a majority of people stop using them after like 3 to 6 months, which is great, because of assumptions that like I already know the data, I already know what's going to happen, which is not true, right? Like our body changes all the time. Like you know, you might get sick, and now your body's in a completely different state. Something happens in your life. There's a chronic kind of impact of something. So I think trying to dispel the notions by giving value in the day-to-day life is actually something that, if we can just even succeed in that and getting people to use their devices more, is one of the biggest kind of like pain points in the whole space, that we don't have continuous longitudinal enough data on individual behavior, right? So I think, I mean, we see it as like a 5 to 10 year kind of like development cycle to get to like an amazing product. But we definitely want to, we're definitely seeing like really good signs of kind of like engagement and behavioral change today. And behavioral change is tough. And the fact that we're actually, you know, already accomplishing some of that is, you know, super exciting for us.
Yeah. And I think behavior change is tough for the most part, just because of the main limitations that come with like wearable devices, which you've mentioned multiple times, is just that like, there's not a lot of action in it. So, I mean, even in someone like myself, who is very obsessed with kind of this data, and I love seeing kind of what's going on with my body, you know, yeah, I get an Oura Ring, but after a few months, I'm just like, well, okay, not that I know what's going to happen with my data, but like, what do I do with it? Yeah, I know I like to wake up every morning and check my stuff, but like after a while, you're just like, well, now I'm just looking at numbers. I'm not using these numbers for anything. I can somewhat maybe predict what my numbers are going to be and whatnot, and maybe use the numbers to validate my subjective feelings, but like I want to do something with them, and I want them to actually play a role in my everyday life. And I definitely think that with Basis, that's going to make it possible. And I think it will make it fun for people to actually start using more wearable devices and like getting interested in their data, because they can now do something with it, and then hopefully actually tie their data on that to sort of real life outcomes, whether that's like improving their aerobic fitness or getting some blood work done, you know, and correlating that with, you know, how this lifestyle intervention worked. You know, I see a scenario where like, hopefully in the future, something that you could do is actually do like, you know, a trial where people are using Basis, and you can see whether this like health intervention using the app, whether these people have like more success than say a standardized standard of care type of thing. I mean, that's, I'm sure way down the line, maybe in your mind, but that could be something super cool where you can actually show that, hey, people who use Basis, they significantly improve whatever outcome it is compared to these people who are just given the Fitbit and not really told what to do with like that data. And I'm sure there would be some sort of impressive outcome with that, but
100%. Yeah, definitely intriguing especially from a health span longevity kind of like
definitely
recovery and strain. I think those are the kind of all cause mortality, like recovery, strain, and I guess, yeah, readiness. Let's just call it readiness, right?
Yeah.
Like an all cause mortality kind of predictor, right? So if we can influence that, from a vision standpoint, like from a mission standpoint, let's call it, a big piece of what triggered me to build something was just looking at that 80% or so of things that impact our chronic disease are related to things that decisions we make in our day-to-day life. So, and I've lost 2 people in my life from, them not having the ability to kind of understand or the motivation to understand that information in their day-to-day life. And, this kind of like the traditional healthcare system, let's call it, I don't want to take my shots at kind of like the traditional system, because I'm very much supportive and I empathize, but failed them because of periodic kind of checking. Once a year kind of thing doesn't work because there's just so many changes that happen.
Mm-hmm.
We're stuck with that because we didn't have another option. Because of wearable data and because of other kind of like user generated health data points and options, I think we have a ton of really interesting ways to change that whole spectrum of like decision making about our health throughout our life, increase health span, maybe lifespan, who knows. But I think there's like it's just a matter of believing that like giving trust in these devices. I think there's a lot of distrust inherent because people just don't see anything changing in their life just from having the devices. As you said many times, and I completely agree, is like we open the product, we open the wearable kind of like app and we just see a bunch of data. And now like the cognitive load, even if you understand, requires just so many like decisions to happen. And humans, like, it's such an energy kind of demanding kind of like act to have this cognitive load to think of multiple decisions. And imagine for people who aren't as familiar with the terms, it's just like you're just blasting them with something that's like, oh, I'm just gonna look at a score. Cool, I slept well. Or funny enough, we discovered that people who don't sleep well hate their wearables. Because
yeah, no kidding, right?
Like, why am I tracking this thing, right?
Mm-hmm, right.
People who sleep well use their wearable every day because they're like, oh, great, I get a good score every day.
Right.
That's not behavior change. It's just like, that's so.
It's just reinforcing either whether you did good or bad. You're just seeing, you're just either getting more depressed or maybe more confident in yourself every single day, based on the feedback you're getting.
I will say though, and I don't consider it a wearable, but I do consider it as part of like the value chain. I think, 8 Sleep, for example, is right along the lines of like this vision that we're also kind of like trying to promote, which is this the health on autopilot. So I think the fact that the mattress itself automatically adjusts to enable you to improve your sleep quality and your sleep length. Amazing. I mean, that's essentially what you want to get to the point where George doesn't have to know why or how it got to that outcome. The better outcome just happens. That's what the concept of autopilot means, right? Like, and I think we can constantly try to go against the grain and like just try to force people to like learn about things and like behavioral change and all that, or we can just enable an environment where things can happen so much easier and get them to the better outcome. And I think that's, unfortunately, or for better or for worse, I guess, that's what human behavior is like.
No, I think that's a very good point, because there are people who are very interested in understanding the whys and the whats of their health, but there are some people who just, why do you go to a doctor? Because they went through 20 years of medical school and they can just tell you what to do. If you don't care why this disease happened, just give me the solution. And that's sort of what Basis is doing. And some people, again, want to be on autopilot and some don't, but I think there's room for both of those types of people, those who want to really dive in deep to the data and those who just want the surface level, tell me what to do. All the data can be hidden and that's okay with me. So I think, you're kind of appealing to both of those markets with the app.
Yeah. I think we have we have a mix of both for sure. But interesting to learn from both sides. Interesting
Yeah.
what actually intrigues each side. Definitely a lot of from the biohacker type, which I fall into. I guess it's like, hey, tell me more. I want to understand why. Can I influence it? Can I play with it? Can I essentially empower it? Interesting piece. Can I further personalize it? So once you start giving value, then there's this inherent desire to continue to make it even better. So we've had people ask us to add more data, more of their own health data. And that's actually an intended outcome. Like, we want people to want to see the value proposition to give us more of their personal health data. Yeah, definitely exciting, kind of like an exciting space to build in. Like, it's almost like it is within the wearable space, but it's like it's almost like building like a societal kind of driven product, like understanding how society works, instant gratification, kind of like hierarchy of needs, and building around that is fun. I mean, to me, it's a fascinating kind of like experiment on human behavior.
No, it is, and it's a fascinating space. And as far as I'm concerned, there really isn't another product out there like it. And I think the very unique thing about it is that you are taking data, taking opinions from people who are using it, using that to kind of build this app up. So we got some dogs barking in the background. Using the data to kind of create the best product possible. So kind of note, if listeners do want to learn about the app, if they want to sort of test it out, maybe getting more information about it, where can they do that? Can you tell them where they can go to maybe sign up to either be a tester or to get kind of information about release dates and things like that?
Yeah, two best places to get in touch with us is on our website, basishealth.io. So the letter I, the letter O at the end, not .com. And on our Twitter, basis, BASIS_health. You can reach out to us on Twitter. You can sign up on the website. As soon as you sign up, you'll instantly kind of hear back from us. And then assuming, of course, you have a wearable, and assuming, unfortunately, we're only on iOS right now, so only on iPhone devices. Assuming you have an iPhone, very likely we'll schedule a short call with you. We can chat, we can understand your needs, your expectations, and get you signed up for the beta.
Great. And yeah, I would recommend people do that. I've been testing it out for, I think, a few months now. And after, I'm going to hope to provide a little more maybe direct feedback through the app, maybe some recommendations, but I found it super valuable and very interesting to try out. So I would really encourage people to sign up, and I'm excited for like the final product to release. And then how about you, George? Where, if people want to follow you, say on social media, if you have a website, where can people find more about you or say hey if they'd like to do that?
Similarly, Twitter. I'll give you my Twitter handle because
sure.
It'll be tough to kind of explain. But then also on LinkedIn. So George Georgallides.
Great.
You can find me as the one that's affiliated to Basis if there's other ones.
Perfect. And I'll have links to all of those in the show notes, to your Twitter, to the Twitter Basis, and all those websites, so people can find those easily.
And also George at basishealth.io. So they can also email me directly. Happy to chat with anyone, either with questions or recommendations on the product, kind of like interest to kind of work with us, whatever it is. We're open to speaking to anyone that's interested in the space.
Cool. Awesome, George. Well, it was great to talk to you about the app. As I mentioned, I'm still trying it out and really excited about it. And I appreciate you explaining everything. I hope that people find this interesting, and I hope that people reach out to you and check out the app, because I think this is going to be something huge. And I really appreciate you chatting with me today and taking some time.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me on. Thanks for providing amazing support for the product and busting it up. Thanks so much, Brie.
Yeah, no problem, George. Have a great rest of your day.
Likewise. You too.
Bye.
Bye.